Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast, focused on providing valuable information for anyone looking to undertake a new build or extension project. We'll share our tips, tricks and stories from a building designer's perspective.
Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast. I'm your host, Amelia, and once again, we're joined by Frank Gesges.
Hey, Amelia. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm going great. It's end of the week. Had a big lunch. I'm a happy man.
That's good to hear. We all like a boss that's happy. What are we going to talk about today?
I thought we'd talk about hazardous conditions. You might be looking at a house and it's in hazardous position in that something could be a hazard around the house. You could be looking at land, you could look at a house, you could be looking at a unit, an apartment. So I just thought we'd have a chat about that and some of the stuff we've come across and some things you wouldn't think, not necessarily hazardous, but gee, makes you think twice about buying a house, as I'll share a story with my brother's house. But yeah, I just want to talk about coastal, a lovely coast around Tasmania, all around Australia. We love a house on the coast, looking out on the ocean.
Yeah, and I mean, we have talked a little bit about that in another podcast.
Yeah, and the reason I say harsh conditions and sometimes hazardous is the salt spray. So you got the surf breaking, wind blowing, and you got this salty mist that comes along and hits your house. And can be a bit harsh on your house, wreck all your fittings.
Rusty, make it all rusty.
Rusty, corrosion, aluminium. I've seen it actually strip away wall claddings.
Wow.
Highly exposed, beautiful outlook. There's one up at Low Head, and I was there looking at another job and it ripped parts of the cladding off. It was so harsh. It was like a sandblast.
Is that kind of the wind as well?
Yeah, 100%. You get a high wind with a bit of salt, bit of sand, and blow the paint off the side of the weatherboards type stuff. In this case, it was actually Hebel that actually ripped through the coating and ate at the Hebel. And I've seen bricks too, blocks, cop an absolute hiding. The classic is when you look at old toilet blocks, council toilet blocks and public spaces near those, and it's like the side of them is sandblasted.
Yeah, and it sort of starts to eat itself away, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And imagine that doing to your house. Yes. Imagine what it does to your glass.
Yeah, that can't be good.
All the nice finishes.
Yeah.
And that's why you look at some holiday homes and they've got stainless handrails after a few years. Might be stainless, but some of the bits aren't stainless. There's little bits of rust on it or stains on it. And that's pretty harsh. And the level of maintenance that you need on a house like that goes up such another level. The other thing is looking at alpine conditions. So in Tasmania, we've got a place, Central Highlands, under the National Constructions Code. It's zone...
Is it 8?
Yeah, 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. Climate zone 8. Tassie, the rest of us, we're climate zone 7. But when you go to 8, you're in alpine and you're dealing with quite a number of different things, obviously temperature, but also the alpine areas are a lot harsher too. I know here in Tasmania, you go up to the highlands, there's not a lot of big trees up there.
No, and you were talking about before how often there's a lot of sort of moisture in the air as well.
So there's certain aspects of it, yeah. We've done a couple of houses up there and you're standing there and it's misty, and you can actually see the moisture in the air, little droplets.
Yes.
It's like a fog, but it's just a mist, and everything's wet. You're standing there and you're getting damp.
Yeah, that can't be good for a house.
Well, no.
Not long term.
But there's plenty of houses up there that have survived that for a long, long time, and they use a lot of natural materials to be able to achieve that.
That's interesting that's sort of how they've done it.
Yeah, using timbers, stone, going back to natural materials seems to do okay up there.
That's surprising.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
And your roofing material, you've got to probably use a thicker gauge roofing material. So those things have to be considered, and just the nails that you use or the screws that you use. It is a harsh environment. And then you've got snow load and you're covered in snow, and then you're not. Then it's a stinking hot day. It changes massively the temperatures. So that has an effect on the building as well. High wind areas, so Central Highlands, certain places, and same with the coastal, really high winds. So they obviously blow onto the house, not rocket science, but your window frames actually have to be designed for that. The frame of your building has to be designed. Your balustrading, all sorts of stuff have to be considered. The last thing you want is something to peel the roof off the top like, can opener.
No, you don't want that.
No, but you see it every now and then when you get these little tornadoes or high wind areas and they rip the roof off. It does happen. Bushfire. This is classic all over Australia. Obviously, not just a harsh condition, it's a highly hazardous condition. And this comes down to the homeowner doing maintenance. And you just hope that your neighbours and councils and Crown land maintain their land around you.
Yeah, because that can affect
Massive.
the bushfire attack level, can't it?
Yeah, very much so. But even just common sense. I mean, it's all well and good. Whenever you do a house, you've got to go through this process. You may be exempt from bushfire. It's deemed to be safe. But say if you're in an area and there is bush around you and it's rated at a certain level, we'll get the house passed, get all your permits, get it built. But it's the ongoing maintenance to keep your building safe, cleaning it out, keeping the garden around well maintained. And you just hope your neighbours are going to do the same, and you just hope council does the same and any other organisation does the same to reduce the potential risk to your house.
And just to point out, it might not be super bushy conditions. You might have
Grasslands,
exactly.
Yeah, very much so. There's been plenty of footage of grasslands going so fast, with the winds pushing them, people getting caught out.
Yeah.
It's very sad, but that's the harsh environment that we have in Australia, and it's taken for granted sometimes. So you've got to be smart about this. So another one is our soils. I've spoken about this so many times. Harsh conditions, sometimes the soils... not just harsh, but hazardous because of in landslip, or as we found in years gone by, the houses have been sitting there for 40, 50 years and then all of a sudden the landslip's activated.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just started slipping for no reason. It wasn't on any maps.
That's really surprising.
Oh, it's crazy and very sad because how do you insure against that? But even then, you look at your weather patterns. They talk about El Nino and what's the other one?
I don't know what the other one is.
You got those weather patterns.
Yes.
And they have a massive effect on the soils because they can dry the soils out. So then when it dries out, it shrinks. And potentially your house will crack or move. Now, I'm not saying that's hazardous. It may put some cracking in your house, but it's something to be aware of. If you're in a highly reactive soils, that's always going to be a possibility. And it's happening right now. I know that around Launceston, we've had some call-outs on, my house is cracked, and had a look, and it says, well, this is coming down to the effect, and there's some solutions to that as well, but it's not an instant solution.
No, and I know you can get things underpinned and that sort of thing.
And sometimes underpinning is not a good idea because,
really?
If the moisture comes back, it swells back up again.
Oh, that's true too.
It's not an exacting science. You need experts to, we call in experts to have a look at this stuff. Don't just jump to the conclusion, just putting it underpin or do certain thing. The weather does have a massive effect long term. Funnily enough, that drying of soils also has a big effect on bushfire as well.
Yeah, it would.
Yes, and we don't necessarily always think about that. And we've got lovely types of trees and shrubs in Australia full of oil, and they light up really well.
That's...
Our gum trees, they light up like a Roman candle. So just want to point these out. So if you're looking at buying either a house or land, these are the certain little things you need to look at. Be aware of it. Also the history of the house, where it's been. Sometimes there's some other hazards you've got to consider. Are you close to an industrial? Are you within an attenuation zone?
What's that?
So it's a circle or such that they put around certain activities, like crematoriums.
Oh, okay.
So that you've got to get reports and stuff if you're building a new place, but is there odours and stuff coming from the crematorium? Sewage ponds or sewage pump stations, for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. Because the interesting thing with quite a few of these sewage treatment plants, they're actually not too bad from an odour point of view. It's when bad chemicals or something goes down and kills the bacteria, then it starts smelling really bad.
Yeah, yuck.
And people have probably heard your septics or your package treatment plants for on-site sewage treatment on rural properties or areas that are not serviced by sewer. If they get the wrong chemicals and they kill the bacteria, the thing stinks, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
and then they put out a pretty tasty odour.
Oh, I don't think odour and tasty should be in the same sentence.
No, that's probably the wrong term. But you're living in your house, you're having your dinner, and you got that smell. You're not going to be a happy camper.
No, you're definitely not.
No. So things to be aware of, and this is why you've got to be careful with what you put down the drains and your sinks and all that when you've got septics and package treatment plants. You put the wrong chemicals down there, you put something nasty down there, you kill the bacteria, it doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, it's going to stink like you wouldn't believe.
Ugh.
You know, it's just holding the waste, not treating the waste. And that's why there's rules with those. Yeah, so we're just talking about potentially other hazards. Here's one that you probably wouldn't guess, and my brother experienced this, and bought a house, and very nice bit of acreage, and right next door there was like a pond, a dam, and there was a creek feeding in and out, had all the reeds and stuff. After a while, they noticed there was a lot of snakes.
Oh, yuck.
And they were going past his house, around the house, and he had a couple of dogs, and they weren't scared. They were going straight to the creek.
Oh, that's a worry.
It was dinner time. There's lots of little froggies in there and stuff, and she's like the buffet.
Oh, yuck.
Well, it's just nature. That's what it is.
That's a worry for the dogs. They might get bitten.
Oh, yeah, no, it's 100%. So my brother had to deal with a couple of little challenging locals that got a bit inquisitive. Yeah, and that ended up being a long-term problem and took a while to sort that out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but you don't realise that. Well, in Tasmania, we've got quite a number of different snakes, and they're actually scared of us most of the time. But, like, if you're in the way of their food or, you know...
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of aggressive ones out there at certain times of the year,
certain
mating
times
season
and, also,
and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but if the dog goes after them, what do you think they're going to do?
Oh, exactly. They're going to defend themselves.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind when you're in rural properties. You're going to face a few of the locals.
Yes.
And that's why you don't keep stagnant water lying around and other things like that. Other thing to look out for was the background or history of the sites. So let's just say you're looking at a house, but it's built near an old railway or an old factory.
Yes.
Or it's a new subdivision built over an old site, what we call brownfield sites, where it's been reclaimed. Like in Hobart, there's been a brick factory that's been turned into subdivision. We had the Launceston Showgrounds here, a huge site, massive, and built its own, suburb almost. It was just massive. Again, that was a brownfield site.
Yeah, right.
You know, if they had reclaimed the old railways in Launceston, but that was been turned into education and museums and all that. But you'll find them as cities grow, they're going to reclaim this land. And on the mainland, like in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, all these places, common to reclaim old disused industrial land, and they have to reclaim that. And there's been cases where it hasn't been done well and it's failed, and there's been heavy metals in the soils or massive subsidence. So sometimes they haven't put the soil properly or formed a sinkhole or haven't dealt with the drainage properly. Mega problems.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know I looked at a block of land last year, and it was on a old, like it's a farming property.
Yep.
And it was deemed contaminated. I was basically told don't touch it with a 10-foot pole because it was an old flax factory.
Oh.
Yeah, on an old farming site. So.
Yep, they pop up.
Yeah.
There's good records of that.
Yeah, I had to ring the council and they gave me a bit of advice.
Was that Launceston Council?
No, that would have probably been Meander Valley.
Yeah, that's good. That's great that they have that information. That's very useful because then you've got to understand what the contamination is too.
Yes.
You know, if it's an old farm, okay, big deal. Generally, most farms are good, but I had one where it was an apple orchard and there was known storage of large quantities of pesticides.
Yeah, right.
And that was highlighted. That had to be dealt with or proven. Where the house was going wasn't anywhere near where the pesticides were stored, potentially.
Here's another interesting one, an old petrol station.
Yep.
That's another example of, I guess, a contaminated site.
Potentially it could be.
Yeah.
Yes, it has to be tested and proven that it's not. So the EPA are all over that. Like they're hard as nails on those types of sites and they have to be cleaned up. And I know of one we looked at and the contamination was plain awful to the point is you don't even really want to use it as part of a survey.
Really?
It's that contaminated.
Wow.
It's terrible. And then you're paying for the cleanup. Yeah, there was an old industrial site on the southern part of Launceston. It was an old steel fabricator's yard, and that was heavily contaminated as well. And they spent, it was a lot of money to clean it up, and they had heavy oils in there and grease and steel, just all sorts of rubbish in there. That was just dumped as it was back then. We looked at the titles because we're doing something around the property, investigating for someone, and it had on the titles stock race.
Oh.
So it used to hold stock there because in that street used to have a canal.
Really?
The Margaret Street, there used to be a canal.
Wow, that's surprising.
It's got this ginormous stormwater system through it now, but it used to be, they used to run the barges up there.
Wow, I wouldn't have picked that.
Well, you know the park called the Brickfields.
Yes, yeah.
You know what's called the Brickfields?
No.
They made bricks.
Oh, well, that makes sense. I feel like a dummy for even asking.
No, I had to do that one, sorry. But isn't it interesting history? Launceston's over 200 years old, which is nothing compared to around the rest of the world. But we've got these old factory sites, and yet they've been turned into something else. Some have been more heavily contaminated than others.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you wouldn't know, would you?
No.
It's fascinating history of old cities. Yeah, and what used to be a canal, they used to run the barges up and down, and now it's turned into a road that used to flood really bad. But now they've got these massive pump stations and stormwater lines, or stormwater/sewerage lines.
So how do we create the designs for people when you come across these harsh conditions? What do you have to sort of impose or...
Well, first you've got to look at to understand all these conditions. Now, there is a lot of good information out there that's available to talking about the site. This historical information you found one with contamination, whether it's... But if you're close to the sea, yep, it's going to be highly corrosive. So you've got to design to suit that under the National Construction Code. It's very clear. And then you've got to use the right products that are suitable. Mm-hmm. And some products they will not warranty when they're in a certain distance to breaking surf.
And I guess the same or similar would apply for bushfire. You've got to use certain materials as per the National Construction Code.
And design, and also how it's designed with vents, how they are designed. The windows have to be designed correctly. Materials that you use, like you say, the fixings. Yeah, there's all these Australian standards to it. Plus, there's also some good practical sense to this stuff as well. So dealing with high humidity, you know, with moisture in the air, that one's a tough one to deal with, because it's always wet. So you've got to use materials that can handle that moisture.
Yes.
Same with high winds. Well, you've got to design for high winds. It'll blow the furniture straight off your deck. So you may design putting windbreaks in outdoor spaces. How do you do your entry? You want to put, you know, windbreaks in there. You look up at the Highlands or in farming areas where there's just big paddocks. There's no protection from the wind.
No, there's not.
There's a place just outside Launceston, just past Lagana, called Grindelwald, and sitting on top of the hill. She's a windy old spot up there at times. Same thing, it's just got to be designed to suit. But people want a view, they like the position, so they're going to put up with the high winds. In relation to the snakes and ponds, well, I haven't got a complete answer on that one. And with industrial ones, really, there should be a lot of background information. And you know how we spoke about titles?
Yes.
A while ago, we talked about Part 5 agreements, Section 71s. That brownfield or contaminated or reclaimed land will potentially be within the title because it's part of those planning conditions.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, that's good.
Well, it's not always there, but it should be there. So this is where looking under the titles, the covenants, and all those Section 71s. Also talking to the council about contaminations and any other potential hazards on the site, because then that information is not always available online. We go searching online for a lot of stuff. But also local knowledge is very, very powerful there as well. Now, there's one other one I want to point out. It's salinity. So that, it's just outside of Launceston, Meander Valley. They have a whole big areas of salinity. That is a problem.
Really?
Yeah. So you've got to specify how you're going to do drainage, how you're going to deal with it on site. It's not rocket science. Any designer should be capable of doing it, but you've just got to be able to address it. But then you've got other weird stuff, and I'm going to pick on Meander Valley Council again, but it's not picking on it, it's actually a beautiful thing. The cask area, all the limestone.
Yes.
So there's a big chunk around Mole Creek and all up through there. We've got all these limestone under the ground, and you've got these beautiful cave systems, King Solomon caves. And
Yes.
what else? There's a few other ones. I believe a lot of cavers, they call those crazy people that go diving underground in these tiny little holes in their caving gear. What's that called? Is that called splonking?
I don't know. There is a special word for it,
Yeah,
though.
those crazy guys that go down these black holes into these caves.
Oh, it's a bit scary, really.
That's crazy scary.
Yeah.
It's like those divers that do it, you know, through those caves, like saving those kids in Thailand.
You wouldn't want to be claustrophobic.
Oh, you can't. Yeah, I just
Crazy.
can't fathom how these guys do it. But utterly amazing. But in Meander, to deal with the cask area is, as part of your development application, is how you're going to deal with this. How your wastewater treatment, so you're not dumping sewage down through the water systems.
Yeah, you don't want that.
You know, so, and how the stormwater's collected and how it's dealt with. So it's a very sensitive area and they want to protect it, and so they should. So that has to be taken into consideration. That's not so much a hazard as much as being aware of how to deal with the conditions. Salinity can be a hazard because that can actually wreck the bottom of your house.
Can it really?
Yeah.
So it's kind of corrosive?
Yeah, it kind of breaks down. I think it's been known to break down concrete and masonry
Wow.
if it's not dealt with properly. Yeah.
Yes.
As I understand it, I'd love to be corrected if I'm wrong there. Yeah, so these are little things that you find out all over the place. And I'm sure all over Australia there's little different bits of natural occurring or man-made hazards within the soils or surrounding. Yeah.
So what are the take-home points for anyone that is, one, trying to purchase either a house with land that is hazardous or a block of land? Where do they start?
Well, we're fortunate in Tasmania. We've got a thing called Plan Build. Just type in plan build, one word, .com.au. And that's a government website, and you put in your address and it'll list out all the things that is on record on the government websites, the list and a couple of other ones, and planning and a whole bunch of stuff, and it'll tell you a whole ton of information. That's one part. You can go into the councils and check if there's any contamination or anything like that, or any other known hazards. And it's just smart doing your research.
Oh, definitely.
You know, the other thing it tells you about flood overlays. We didn't talk about that, did we? There's another hazard for you.
Yeah, that's a pretty big hazard.
Shouldn't laugh about it because it's fair dinkum.
Yeah.
And we've had in the last 7 years, we've had some pretty interesting floods, bigger than normal, and they have done some massive effects, especially up the northwest coast and up in the central part of Tasmania, and took out bridges and houses and all sorts of stuff. It was horrible.
We've had some awful ones.
Yeah, but that should be mapped, knowing that you're in the flood zone.
And you can actually...
Or overland stormwater runoff.
You can look it up too. It is a little bit more complicated, but you can look it up on the list as well.
Yeah, the list, but not all councils actually have it mapped.
Really?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes you've got to go to the council and ask them. A bit annoyed at some of those councils that don't make it public, and I don't understand why. I won't go into that soapbox at the moment. But I believe it should be freedom of information for all this stuff.
Yes, I agree.
You don't want to buy something if you're in a flood zone.
Oh, definitely not.
Or in the path of overland flow at a storm. So if all the stormwater can't handle it, where does it go? It goes overland.
Yes.
And you don't want to go through your front door and out the back door.
No, that would be problematic.
But at those big storms we had in Hobart, that did happen.
Really?
It literally happened. Went through the back door and out through the front door.
Oh, dear.
A couple of houses. It was horrific.
Sounds an expensive exercise.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of them. It was unbelievable. I've had whole inside retaining walls inside a house, two-storey house, and retaining wall blown clean in, and the top floor is still hanging there with all the bricks and everything, and the downstairs blown in, all the mud went straight through.
That's horrendous.
Yeah.
So do your research.
Again, look, this is about doing good due diligence when you're looking at buying a property. But even if you've got a property right now, what's the harm in having a look? If you've had a property for X amount of years, the councils and the state government are funding more and more information to be able to deal with the stuff going in the future. They are mapping pathways of stormwater, right, when it floods and gets out of control. They have to learn how to deal with this. So the councils are getting more and more information, and that's what drives a lot of their policies for new developments. So if you want to put an extension at the back of the house, hey, our stormwater system's under capacity, you need to put a detention basin in. This is all part of them trying to deal with inadequate systems as we build more and more houses, more and more shops, more and more businesses on the original stormwater systems that are now under capacity because they were never designed for that many.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's no harm in checking out what your house is. Is it have any potential risks or hazards?
Yeah.
Generally, we don't find out until we want to do something to the house.
That is very true. And it's hard because, like a lot of things, you can't always see it. No, you can't always see the problem.
Oh, of course,
especially
until
if it's,
it happens.
in the soil or,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, until something happens.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that's why when you actually want to do something to your house, this is where some lot of designer architect would do a lot of this research because we need to know if there's something we have to deal with. So it makes a lot of sense, but it's nice to have the heads up on your house though, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. All right, we might wrap it up there, folks. Thanks for listening to the Building Design Primetime podcast.
Catch us later.
You're listening to the Building Design Primetime podcast.